In today's video, I wanted to show you this exercise I did in watercolor. So I started off by mixing ultramarine blue together with raw umber to get a sort of dark indigo blue color. And I wanted to stick to just one color in order to keep this exercise simple. I also chose to use only one brush, and the brush I chose to use is Rosemary & Co. Series 304 Synthetic Pointed Round Brush, size 5/0. Even though it's a size 5 brush, it's much bigger than a size 5 round brush. And what's so special about this particular brush by Rosemary & Co. is that it's similar to a mop brush. So by pressing down on the brush, you get a very thick stroke, and by holding only the tip of the brush to the paper, you can create very fine lines. And so this brush lends itself to all kinds of expressive strokes. And that's actually what I was going for with this experiment. I wanted to see how I could use watercolor to create shapes that are expressive and amorphic. I wanted to play around with the darks and the lights. I wanted to see how watercolor behaves. In the past, when I made experiments with watercolor, I would usually play around with too many colors at once, and I would usually put too much water on my brush, and very fast I would lose control of the paint and of the experiment. I wouldn't necessarily be learning a lot. In this experiment, I wanted to play around with shapes that were more interesting, more expressive. I wanted that juxtaposition between thick strokes and very fine lines, and I wanted to steer clear of anything that looks too geometric. So I started this experiment when I felt that I was too distracted to paint anything figurative, and I still wanted to sit down with my paints and learn something. So I thought this kind of experiment would be good to try when I'm sort of distracted and not feeling like I can sit down and paint something that would be too difficult for me to focus on. So this is a really great experiment to do if you're just trying to feel what watercolor can do and what your brushes can do. I think it would be really interesting to try this experiment, but with a different type of brush, like maybe a flat brush or even just a plain round brush, and progress very slowly and see how the brush behaves and what kinds of shapes you can create. And when I look at artists that I appreciate, when they use watercolor, a lot of the time I see them making very precise strokes, and they know how much water they're putting down, how much pigment they're putting down. So I feel that this exercise helped me focus and create more precise strokes, even though they're actually pretty random and meandering strokes, rather than trying to cover large areas or making a lot more of a sloppy experiment. So in that sense, this experiment gave me a bit of confidence with my brush and with my watercolors, because it's very easy to feel that I have no idea what I'm doing with watercolor. It's going all over the place. The color isn't as vibrant as I want it to be. So you may see me here putting too much water on the page at some points in this experiment, but I did try not to have like huge puddles of water on the page, and not to work in dry brush, but actually still to use a reasonable amount of water and not too much water. So filling this small paper took about 20 minutes or so, and that was just one pass on the paper. It would definitely be possible to go over the shapes after they've dried and to add a second layer or a second bunch of shapes, a second pass over those shapes, and to have them overlap and play around with the transparency of watercolor. I really enjoyed seeing how with just one brush you could create so many types of strokes, and obviously with watercolor you can get very light and very dark tones pretty easily. There was no purpose to this exercise except just to practice, to get familiar with watercolor and with my brush, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I hope that in some way the strokes that I made in this exercise will stay in my subconscious and somehow find themselves in future paintings and improve future paintings, make them more expressive and make them maybe do things that I didn't know how to do with watercolor. If you want to try out this exercise, I'd love to see it. Either leave me a comment or send me a message on Instagram. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you next time.